So, this video is going to be about AI, but first, let me tell you the story of a very obscure underground rock band called the Beatles. Ugh, he's talking about the Beatles again?
Here we go again.
It's never enough with this guy. I know, but just follow me here. On April 10th, 1970, Paul McCartney officially announced to the press that he was leaving the most influential rock band in modern history. The Beatles were breaking up. It very quickly became a worldwide news story. To say the Beatles were huge in 1970 would be an understatement. For many, they were the glue keeping their lives together. It's not as if they were fading away into obscurity. They were breaking up at the peak of their popularity. Millions of fans around the world were devastated. And it just did not feel like a very optimistic way to start off the decade, especially after experiencing such a tumultuous ending to the 60s.
The event is so momentous that historians may one day view it as a landmark in the decline of the British Empire. The Beatles are breaking up.
Was this the end of the counterculture era? The end of rock and roll? Despite this new gaping hole that had just been formed into pop culture, many people tried to lighten up. Perhaps it wasn't goodbye, after all. The 70s would be filled with speculation of a possible Beatles reunion. Some accidental hoaxes would appear, and the real thing even almost happened. But they ultimately decided not to. They just went on, writing their own music, living their own lives. The last time John Lennon ever spoke to Paul, he said, "Think about me every now and then, my old friend." And on December 8th, 1980, John was shot and killed outside of his apartment in New York City. That reunion never happened, and now would never happen. The Beatles were officially gone. Or were they? Fast forward to 1994, the remaining Beatles, Paul, George, and Ringo, get a hold of some old tape recordings from Yoko Ono. They were piano demos of songs that John wrote but never released. And so all three of them got together in the recording studio and created a whole new song, overlaying John's tapes over their recorded tracks. And so, Real Love and Free as a Bird were released, becoming their first reunion in 25 years. But there was one problem. Another song included in these tapes, simply called Now and Then. Coincidentally, also the last words John ever said to Paul. After several days of trying to piece something together, the recording was just too damaged and 1990s technology couldn't salvage it. So the entire project was scrapped and Now and Then remained shelved for nearly 3 decades. But now we're here. We've experienced incredible breakthroughs in our capabilities, and of course, it's largely because of artificial intelligence. We can now restore old footage, isolate tracks, or even create new songs entirely with just the click of a button. The impossible has just become possible. And so the topic of Now and Then was revisited. And after some thought, the last 2 surviving Beatles, Paul and Ringo, were able to use AI to both restore and isolate John's vocals on his demo tape.
I know it's true.
And then through using George Harrison's guitar playing from their first attempt at recording the song back in the 1990s, Now and Then was finally released on November 3rd, 2023. It was a #1 hit. Thanks to AI, the Beatles were able to reunite one last time over 50 years after their breakup. The song has been met with incredible critical praise, but there are also many people who have some reservations about it, and I do actually empathize with this concern quite a bit as well. Should we really be using AI to make art? Now, make no mistake, AI can be an incredibly helpful tool for creating art that maximizes its potential, such as cleaning up and isolating vocals on a track. But what about when the AI is the art? In just a couple hours, you could, right now, from your computer, create an entirely new Beatles song. So I pulled out my guitar, started recording, and replaced my voice with John Lennon's. And all it took was around 30 minutes of voice training, various archive recordings of John speaking and singing. I also did this with Buddy Holly.
Hearts that are broken and love that's untrue. Please go with learning the game.
And some Green Day.
It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.
And if I want a photo, all I have to do is type in the prompt, and it gives it to me just a minute later. This is horrifying. And it was only just a few years ago where such a thing wasn't even possible. For most everyday people, mainstream AI kind of showed up overnight, or at least exploded overnight in this new form it currently possesses. What was once a primitive concept made up of beta testing and wishful thinking has now become a commodity to be bought and sold. It is something so eerily advanced in its capabilities, it may just very well be fungible with human labor. Because you don't have to pay AI, you don't have to feed it, you just let it work forever. And of course, our worst nightmares are now coming to fruition. The corporations are getting involved. People are now reportedly losing their jobs due to its massive growth in virtually all sectors. These sudden events have posed what will likely be one of the most controversial questions of the 21st century. Is AI going to replace what we do, particularly art? And to that controversial question, I have a controversial answer. No, I don't think it will. I believe what we're seeing now is the short-term effects of a long-term phenomenon. Art, by nature, has to be human. And no matter how advanced AI can possibly get, that human connection cannot be replicated because it has to be genuine by nature. And with that mindset and the growth of this technology comes a responsibility to make sure we over-adapt, that we can coexist with AI without having to compromise our ability to achieve independent thought or creativity. AI was designed to make life easier, not harder, and that's the way it should be. Now, if you're still worried about AI taking over all the things that you love to do, then you need to use your skills to outperform AI. Well, thankfully, Skillshare is here to help you with that. Is there a particular hobby or passion that you've always wanted to learn how to do and get good at? Well, Skillshare has all the things you need to go from a hobbyist to someone who actually makes money doing the things you love to do. And that's because Skillshare courses are led by professionals within the industry who are dedicated to making sure that all aspiring members succeed. And they have classes on all kinds of things: photography, business, graphic design, cooking, things I didn't even realize I needed. One of my all-time favorite films is American Graffiti. The cinematography is just pure eye candy. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm actually planning a project that I want to take place within this same type of mid-century street setting without, renting an entire city. And there's literally a Skillshare course on that. Like, what are the odds? I've been looking for that for years. So now I have curated a list of all the courses that I want to complete within the next 6 months, so I can apply them to my everyday life and job. And now you have the opportunity to do that as well. The first 500 people who use my link will get 1 month of Skillshare completely free. I am very excited to get started on these courses, and I hope you'll be as well. A special thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now, as we mentioned, AI is appearing throughout all sectors of our society. Writing, problem solving, remastering, assistant technology, job hiring, just about anything you can think of is now incorporating some kind of AI into it. So why is this video focusing on art specifically? Well, that's because art is the only medium for earning capital that exists solely within its own space. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, art is not exactly a necessity in the traditional sense. You can't live without food, clean water, or medicine, but you can live without art. It would just be a very boring life. In fact, that's how humans lived for thousands of years, until around 12,000 years ago, when something called the Agricultural Revolution happened. Before that, since the dawn of time, humans were almost constantly on the lookout hunting for food, living in caves. They had very little to almost no time to make their own art, with a few surviving exceptions, but then something amazing happened. If you put seeds in the ground, it just makes food for you. We don't have to do as much hunting anymore. It's a food-making machine. It's automated. So people finally had so much time on their hands to do other things like build civilization, law and order, art. I wonder if people back in the caveman days were like, oh, this Fertile Crescent shit, it's gonna take all our hunting jobs. Back in my day, I walked through blood and bones to kill a wild boar. Now all these sissies have to do is put a seed in the ground? This generation is screwed. Ooga booga. But hunting never disappeared, did it? People still hunt today. It simply learned to coexist with farming and adapted to be supplementary, a secondary option to getting food that is still very much active today. There tends to be this sort of cycle that occurs when some kind of revolution takes place. This new breakthrough of an idea enters the picture, and the old ways of doing things end up taking a bit of a dip. There's less priority for them. And then once people really get accustomed to this new way of life, the old starts to come back in a new way. It's similar, but it's different. It goes through a sort of metamorphosis. It retransforms in a way where they now both can participate and contribute to society in their own unique ways. And hunting is just one of many similar examples that have appeared throughout history. We even saw this with telephone operators. At the start of the 20th century, there was this incredibly groundbreaking technology popping up called the telephone. I mean, it was everywhere. It was the cat's pajamas, man. The bee's knees. People loved it so much that it quickly took over the telegram and telegraph systems. Now, it wasn't overnight, but all those jobs that people had working for the telegraph companies, making sure that messages were received, well, they just went away. And those jobs were lost for quite some time. But then those people adapted, retransformed into, you guessed it, telephone operators. What was once a man's job was now turning into a profession almost exclusively consisting of white women, especially during a time where women were fighting for suffrage and rights to exist in the workplace. By 1929, the number of operators working for the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, AT&T for short, was an estimated 160,000. But then, technology got better, and someone came up with a mechanical switching system. And as this new way of phone operating entered the workplace, the need for phone operators went down. And by the 1970s, phone operating as a job was replaced entirely. And you probably are thinking that all these jobs being replaced led to a massive increase in unemployment long term. But that just didn't happen. Yes, the employment of these operator jobs dipped significantly, but the women who were coming of age in the 1970s that would have been ideal candidates for telephone operators 20 to 30 years prior simply found job opportunities elsewhere. They adapted. Instead of being phone operators, they were now secretaries, teachers, even programmers. Yes, programming was almost exclusively a woman's job until recent history. Another example that's more related to this video would be the advent of photography. 1848 was quite an important year, as it was the very first time a photograph appeared in a published newspaper. Before that, you had dozens and dozens of sophisticated illustrations. And then over time, that skill just really wasn't needed anymore, and photography took over. So what happened to those illustrations? Well, they transformed into cartoons, comic strips. And I think with the current explosion of AI technology, we will see something similar happen to art. At the time I am making this video right now, we are currently in the dipping phase of this process, the prioritizing of automation, mass layoffs, etc. And we will see art engage in this similar recreational shift. But the beauty of art is that it kind of always was recreational, based on the nature of its existence, like we just discussed. So is really anything, in terms of principle, changing at all? Because what is art at the end of the day? It is human. It has to be. By definition, it is our way of expressing ourselves and the way we go about life by means of other mediums, even abstract ones. In fact, art is often seen as something indicative of a flourishing civilization. This is because during good times, people's survival needs are fulfilled. They don't have to worry about starving or having a roof over their heads, so they can instead focus that time on doing things that they want to do, whether it's painting, sculpting, music, anything. And the more people are invested in this artwork, the more rich it is in human emotion, and the more it immortalizes the culture and customs of the time in which it was created. And a shining example of this would be, of course, the 1960s. Now, citing the 1960s as an example is such low-hanging fruit, but that's because it was a cultural explosion, arguably the biggest one we saw the whole century. And if you've seen my video, When All Crime Stopped for 1 Hour, there is a good explanation for why. The silent generation and baby boomers came of age during a time where they didn't have to fight in any world wars. Unless you were an American man that got drafted into Vietnam, then yeah, that sucked. But still, they didn't really have to suffer firsthand through low job opportunities or the Depression. They were kind of just existing. Growing up during a booming economy, mass media, and mass consumerism, they even had their own jobs, so they had additional money to spend on top of having their survival needs already fulfilled. So what are they going to spend all that extra time doing? Well, they're going to express themselves, and they're going to do it hard. And so, during this 10-year period, you not only have the creation of incredibly influential artworks that are still regularly discussed and admired today, but these booming economic circumstances gave us the opportunity as humans to completely change our way of life and way of thinking into something that we, in many ways, even collectively recognize today. And I think the quintessential example of this is Andy Warhol's Campbell Soup paintings. I'm honestly not sure there's another artwork that communicates this exact message better than Campbell's soup cans. At a superficial glance, there's absolutely nothing interesting about these paintings, but that's not the reason why it is famous. It's because the 1960s were a time where mass consumerism was peaking due to decades of amazing technological breakthroughs from the Industrial Revolution. Up until very recently at that point, if you wanted food, you had to have your own farm, regularly take care of it, and make sure you had all the necessary supplies to even make that possible. If you didn't have a farm and had to buy food from somebody, well, you better eat it fast or it's going to spoil quite quickly. But as refrigeration, pasteurization, and canned goods enter the picture, and as food production got more automated, these troubles were now history. Instead, you could just go to the grocery store and buy a can of food for 5 cents, and it would stay fresh for years. And what food product became the most common sight to see on store shelves? Well, Campbell's soup, of course. It's cheap, hearty, and made with love. And just that logo alone reminds people of that. The point is that mass consumerism was getting to the point where it could not only be commodified as an actual useful utility, but also as an art form in its own right, just based on what it has become to be recognized. It's exactly the same reason why people wear Pepsi t-shirts now, because Pepsi is a lot more to people than just a soft drink. And in 1962, so was Campbell's soup. And Andy Warhol had the revolutionary idea to remind people of that through his very simplistic paintings. But if I tell Midjourney to create an exact replica of Andy Warhol's Campbell soup paintings, it doesn't mean anything, because that story is now lost. It's no longer remarkable. This is so apparent because a lot of people who worry about AI taking over art aren't even talking about art at all. They are confusing art with aesthetics, and they are very different things. Aesthetics is, oh, my wallpaper looks pretty. Art is what that wallpaper means to you, what it even means to humanity. It is a secondary characteristic of the way that art is manifested. It has a relationship component to it. It moves you and can be powerful enough to completely change you as a person. Andy Warhol's paintings, aesthetically, are kind of boring. Hell, he even used a projector to make them. So from a skill perspective, his work really isn't that remarkable. But the story it tells is so much more powerful than if he drew all of these by hand. But you don't always need a flourishing society for good art to appear. In fact, it can be the exact opposite. The art can sort of act as a cry for help, an expression or almost protest of the hardships that people are experiencing at that given time. The 60s were kind of both the best and the worst. 1968 was not a great time to be alive. Excluding both world wars, it was one of the most politically divisive, violent, and turbulent years in modern history. A year marked by war, disease, racism, political assassinations, wealth inequality, just to name a few things.
I'm better educated than either of my parents, but they don't listen to me.
How can I plan for the future with the draft waiting for me?
And it was during that year the Beatles released what is arguably their most critically acclaimed album, the White Album. On that album was what would become their most controversial song, Revolution 9, an 8-minute long avant-garde piece which perfectly encompassed that tumultuous year. During World War I, you had Dadaism, a form of nonsensical art that appeared as a form of protest to the horrors and injustices that the war brought. These are all the stories that make the art timeless, because despite their settings being in distant times, they provide snapshots of the attributes and feelings humans have since the beginning of time, and will continue to have until the end of it. And because AI simply focuses on the aesthetic part, it doesn't have that human connection by its very design. It is just being trained off of the work of humans. There is nothing that AI knows that we already don't know. I mean, we created the damn thing. But wait, aren't humans just like AI as well? We also learn things through training. But that's the thing, we are learning off of each other. Because unlike AI, we know that we are capable of thinking for ourselves and being creative, as opposed to AI just being the illusion of that. Yeah, this John Lennon song that I made is pretty cool, but who cares? John Lennon is already dead. We know for a fact that this isn't him. So that parasocial connection to him and his music is immediately lost, because we can't help but recognize it as derivative of what it is trying to imitate. And I think maybe some people feel that way about Now and Then. In fact, even the Beatles did. Back in 1997, George Harrison and his wife Olivia were in Providence, Rhode Island, where they came across a jewelry shop. Inside was an art clock that contained a variety of interesting pieces, including Scrabble letters that spelled out, you guessed it, Now and Then. He bought the piece and took it home with him. Fast forward to 2022, over 20 years after George Harrison's passing, Olivia finds this clock, puts in new batteries, and hangs it back up on the wall. Immediately after, she gets a phone call. It's Paul McCartney, asking her permission to use George Harrison's guitar recordings to create the song Now and Then. She was completely blown away. I think this is Georgie saying it's okay, Olivia said. It felt like approval. A photo of this clock is featured on the back of the album. So yes, AI was used to clean up John's voice. But is it still really him? Or is it technically just a fake? Well, was it ever really him? We all know how a record player works. A needle runs through a bunch of bumps and grooves on a disc, and the sound that the needle makes hitting against all those bumps is able to create the sound that you desire. And so every song has a unique series of engravings, so you've never actually heard John's voice. You've just been hearing a bunch of bumps and grooves that imitate John's voice when played fast enough. Just like how you've never actually seen me. You're just looking at a bunch of ones and zeros that are doing the best they can to recreate the way I look when I actually was sitting here recording this. And because of that, I actually think it's fine to use AI as an artistic tool rather than some attempt at replacing. I have used AI before. I'm actually using AI right now. The acoustics in my living room are terrible. You probably noticed that in my Windows 7 video when I was first getting used to the new setting. Now I still use the appropriate microphone and sound equipment, but even with soundproof walls or foam, it still creates a lot of problems. So I use an AI tool that removes any background noise or reverb to give me the sound that I desire. It's a sort of cleanup tool, just like with Now and Then. I don't use AI for my scripts though. I actually love writing and researching, and I write everything from the heart. But honestly, maybe I should use it. People would correct me a lot less in my videos. That's not how you pronounce telemetry. Why am I even watching this video? I don't know, Kyle. Why are you watching? Is it because of my looks? It's because I'm good looking, isn't it? It's okay, I don't judge. Just tell us how you really feel, Kyle. So for that reason, I don't think there's anything wrong with using some AI as a useful tool to maximize your artistic potential, because as long as it tells a story and reminds us of our human condition, that's all you need. And the more AI you use, the more poignant its absence gets. You may notice that AI art currently has a distinct look to it. Whether it is used in a thumbnail or advertisement, it is immediately noticeable, and it's a turnoff. It's even worse when it's the whole video. I've even had AI channels steal and redo my videos, but it just doesn't work. People pick up on this right away. I think it's just in our nature to recognize something that is not human. And as for this whole replacing artists thing, I would argue that the type of people using AI for thumbnails and artwork are the same type of people who wouldn't be paying someone to do commissions for them in the first place. Now, I don't speak for everyone's experiences when I say that, but that does appear to be my experience. It's just like that minority of people who complain about there being too many ads on my videos. Were they really gonna sit and watch the whole thing anyway? Like, come on, Kyle, let's be honest. Now, those last few points I made were anecdotal and not backed up by any sort of data, unlike the previous things that I said. So I'm gonna throw you a bone here. Let's say that one day AI does get so powerful that it does take over everything. It satisfies every job requirement, every human need, every spiritual need. All humans have to do is exist. What happens then? Well, this idea is by no means new. If you watched my previous video about cable television, you may remember my section about the short story, The Machine Stops, written by E.M. Forster. Despite being written in 1909, it is an eerie prediction of AI. Since I already discussed the story in detail, I will keep it short. Basically, the Earth is uninhabitable. Instead, people live underground in their own separate rooms, and these rooms are controlled by a machine that provides them food, water, entertainment, companionship. It survives every possible human need that could ever exist. But still, that isn't enough, as the main character of the story chooses to put all that aside and to go exploring the Earth anyway, and will do whatever it takes to make that happen. Now that's just part of the story, but the overall theme is that it is within our nature to be proactive. No matter how much help we get, we still want to do things on our own, and not even the most advanced machine can take that away. And it is in that respect that perhaps ChatGPT, Midjourney, Bard, and all these AI programs aren't replacing art. They are the art. In fact, they may just be the most meta artworks of them all, much like how Warhol's Campbell's Soup encapsulated the economic prosperity of consumerism. These AI programs reflect the lack thereof. We are currently living in times where the workforce is getting more difficult to maintain, and financially supporting yourself is getting harder. And what is a better way of representing that than through a program that is literally designed to convince you that your job, your livelihood, is going to be taken away? Now, AI is here to stay. It is not going anywhere. And with all that, it is now both our responsibility as well as within our ambition to be proactive and use it in ways that enrich our lives rather than diminish them. I want to end this video with a personal story. I was in arts college, and our final project for the semester was to bring an object to class and draw it right in front of us, freehand. This was a class project that my university had practiced for several years. This particular assignment was pretty much tradition. But then, the COVID-19 pandemic happened. We could no longer go to school. So, for the first time, the assignment changed. Instead, we had to find whatever objects we could at home and draw those. So I decided to, very briefly, go outside to my local park, snap a reference photo, and come back into the house and use that as my object reference. For my second photo, I decided to take a full wine glass and empty wine bottle that I had in front of me. Using these as my objects of reference, I got to work and created these drawings. Now, they're not very good, but it does communicate a very powerful message that the photograph I took doesn't, at least not in the same way. The only reason this drawing exists is because I was stuck in my house during one of the strangest times in history, drawing a photo of a completely empty park that was almost always packed full of people. It captures the feelings and experiences that I had while drawing this. Something that could never be replicated in that way ever again. At around this same time, my grandfather was moving into a new house, and he wanted me to make a drawing for him that he could hang up in his house. And in addition to being an assignment, that's what the wine glass drawing was for. Yes, that reference photograph I took of the wine glasses looked better and was easier to put together. But this drawing I made, regardless of appearance and aesthetics, contains the strong and inseparable love connection between a grandfather and a grandson. And that's not to say that photography is always just the push of a button. It is its own art form that takes years of skill, practice, knowledge, and understanding terminology. AI is quite literally just the push of a button. But again, in comparison to hunting, so is putting a seed into the ground. If you're an artist that's watching this right now and is worried about the future, I see you, I'm glad you're here, and nothing can replace you. So I guess what I'm saying is keep calm and stream now and then.